The 10 greatest Western TV shows of all time. 10 shows, 70 years. From black and white bounty hunters to sci-fi themed parks full of murderous robot cowboys. This is the history of the Western on television. 10 television westerns. One launched Steve McQueen's career. One turned Clint Eastwood into a cowboy before Dirty Harry. One ran for 20 straight seasons. Let's start with the bounty hunter who became a movie star. Let's start with a show that almost nobody remembers by name today, even though it launched one of the biggest movie stars of the 20th century. Wanted, Dead or Alive put a young Steve McQueen in the lead as a bounty hunter drifting from town to town, taking down criminals with a sawed-off rifle, and about as much charisma as black and white television could hold. Here's the part that's actually interesting. Almost every TV Western actor of this era dreamed of making the jump to movies, and almost none of them managed it. McQueen did. Watching this show now, you can already see why. Before he was a movie star, he was clearly the most interesting person in every single scene he was in. Then there was the one that basically never left the air. Bonanza ran for 14 years, following rancher Ben Cartwright and his sons, defending a massive spread in Nevada. 14 years is an absurd run for any show, let alone a Western, and part of why it lasted, it didn't just play it safe. Bonanza was one of the first shows of its era to directly tackle racism on screen, which is not exactly what you'd expect from 1960s network television, wedged between soap commercials.
He was dragging a dead man, boy.
Speaking of future legends, here's Clint Eastwood, years before Dirty Harry, years before he was the most iconic gunslinger in movie history, playing a mild-mannered ranch hand on a cattle drive. Rawhide followed trail boss Gil Favor and his crew, moving cattle across the country. And if you only know Eastwood as the squinting, quiet, dangerous man of his later films, watching him here is genuinely strange. He's likable, almost boyish. It's a good reminder that even legends had to start somewhere, usually somewhere a lot less cool than where they ended up. Jump forward about 50 years, and westerns on TV get considerably grittier. Hell on Wheels tells the story of building the first transcontinental railroad, the actual brutal cost of connecting a country, led by a Civil War veteran turned railroad boss. This isn't the tidy black and white morality of the earlier shows on this list. It's a much rougher, more honest look at exactly how wild the West still was before the railroads tamed it. If you grew up on Bonanza, this is what happens when the same genre grows up. And then there's the one that barely looks like a Western at all, until you notice how deeply it's built on Western storytelling underneath. Westworld takes the genre's old tropes, the mysterious man in black, the lawless outlaws, the dusty frontier town, and drops them into a theme park full of android hosts, built for the amusement of wealthy guests. It sounds like a gimmick. It isn't. Some of the best, most twist-heavy television of the last decade came out of taking Western mythology and asking what happens when the outlaws are actually just robots, slowly becoming self-aware. It's proof the genre never really needed horses and six-shooters to work. It needed the ideas beneath them. So that's the first half of this list. A bounty hunter who became a movie star. A family ranch that ran for 14 years. A future icon before he was iconic. A brutal railroad drama. And a sci-fi theme park with a body count. 5 shows. 5 completely different eras. And one genre stretching to cover all of them. What's genuinely interesting, looking at these 5 side by side, is how differently Western gets defined decade to decade. The 1950s version is clean-cut, morally simple, built for a family audience. By the 2010s, the same genre is producing something as dark and philosophical as Westworld. That's not a small shift. That's an entire genre reinventing what it's allowed to be, over and over, while somehow never actually dying. And that's really the through line of this whole list. The Western on television never stayed the same shape for very long, which might be exactly why it never went away. Part 2 picks up with the shows that took the genre even further. A modern-day Western hiding in plain sight. A multi-generational family saga. The longest-running Western ever made, and the one that might be the most acclaimed of them all. Let's pick back up with a show that swaps horses for trucks and outlaws for drug dealers, but keeps everything else about the Western intact. Justified follows a US Marshal, Raylan Givens, sent back to his Kentucky homeland, where he ends up facing off against an old friend turned criminal kingpin. Underneath the modern setting, this is a straight-up Western. The standoffs, the moral code, the reluctant lawman, who'd rather not be the one holding the gun, but always ends up being exactly that. It's proof the genre didn't need the 1800s to work. It just needed the same basic conflict, wearing a different jacket. Then there's the one that goes back to actually build the mythology other shows on this list take for granted. 1883 tells the origin story of the Dutton family. The same family behind the modern hit Yellowstone, following a wagon train of settlers and immigrants across brutal, unforgiving terrain in search of somewhere to call home. This isn't a nostalgic Western. It's closer to a survival story that happens to be set in the Old West, and it doesn't flinch from how many people didn't make it. Now here's the one that might define television Western, more than any other show on this list. Gunsmoke ran for 20 seasons, one of the longest running scripted shows in American television history, period. Not just Westerns. Marshal Matt Dillon spent 2 decades keeping order in Dodge City, and the show built an entire template that basically every Western after it either followed or reacted against. If Bonanza and Rawhide are where the genre started finding its voice, Gunsmoke is where it became an institution.
Matt!
A little wild. Okay. And take it easy and watch the street. You look better sitting down and standing up anyway.
Speaking of that same family, Yellowstone picks up generations later, with John Dutton fighting to hold on to the same land his ancestors settled in 1883. Land developers, rival business interests, and family conflict take the place of outlaws and bandits, but the core Western DNA is unmistakable. This is still fundamentally a story about people willing to do almost anything to protect what's theirs. And finally, the one a lot of critics consider the best television Western ever made. Deadwood is loosely based on the real, lawless frontier town of the same name, built around a foul-mouthed saloon owner and an uneasy, constantly on edge sheriff trying to hold a truly chaotic settlement together. This isn't the clean, family-friendly morality of Bonanza or Gunsmoke. Deadwood is interested in the actual grimy humanity of the frontier, the greed, the vulgarity, the moral compromise, rather than the mythologized version most westerns had been selling for decades. So look at the full 10, side by side, and you can watch the entire genre evolve in real time. It starts clean and simple in the 1950s. Good guys, bad guys, a moral lesson wrapped up by the end of each episode. By the 2000s, it's willing to be as ugly and complicated as the actual history it's drawing from. Same genre, completely different rules by the end. And that's really what makes this list worth making in the first place. A lot of people assume Western means one specific thing, one look, one moral code, one era. But stack these 10 shows together, and what you actually get is a genre that kept reinventing itself decade after decade, sometimes barely resembling what it looked like 20 years earlier, and somehow never actually going away. From a bounty hunter who became a movie star, to robots in a Western theme park, to a family fighting to keep the same land their ancestors settled a century and a half earlier. That's the actual range of what Western has meant on television. 10 shows, 70 years, and one genre that refuses to sit still. If you think I got the order wrong, or left one out that deserved to be here, let me know in the comments. I want to hear which one you think is missing. And if you enjoyed this, there's plenty more where it came from on the channel. See you in the next one.